First of all, good evening, everyone. And I thought I will do this session on thesis writing, giving more practical hints for the reason that sometimes when guides are guiding, and of course residents are writing, there is no kind of what shall I say, a kind of training which will help them write a better, come out with a better thesis book or a thesis product. So this is not about research methodology at all. This is only about the writing part. So I'm doing it in 3 sections so that you can sort of think of any questions you want to ask and things like that. So in 3 Saturdays, I thought this will be the best way we can do it. So without much this thing, I will start my first talk today. That's going to be about what examiners expect in a PG thesis. So I want to ask, can you see this?
Yes, madam.
Yes, ma'am.
And my voice, everything is fine, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, fine. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'll just, this is my first, the first part of the 2 talks today. What do examiners expect in a postgraduate thesis? So I am just going to talk to you about 3 things. One is how this thesis is going to be evaluated. Then how can we improve the quality and what to avoid? So these are the 3 things which I will be covering today. So most of you will already know how your thesis is evaluated at AIIMS Bhubaneswar. There are some people who may be joining us from outside, but this is basically for AIIMS Bhubaneswar. So at our institution, we send it to one external examiner in the normal course of events, and the examiner has to give a report within a particular period of time. So in this report, he will say whether it has been accepted, whether there are any modifications needed, or whether it is rejected. And he gives these comments along with the justifications for it. So these comments and the recommendation is received from the external examiner by the examination section. And then the report is sent from the Dean Examinations to the particular head of the department, who will pass it on to the guide and the student. Now, during the Viva Voce, that is during the clinical examination or the practical examination of whether it is DMMCH or MDMS, there will be a Viva Voce for which 50 marks is given, in which they have to present and defend their thesis. So this is in our institution. Now, how is this evaluated? It is evaluated at many points. See, the thing is, the external examiner may look at it only once, but we hope that once the thesis is done, that every resident will present it to the peers in the department, all the faculty, as well as the other senior residents and residents in the department. So the department, the peers will give some kind of input to this. Then this gets sent to the, once it is written up and all that, it goes to the external examiner. Then from there, it comes back to the guide and the student to correct. If there are any revisions to be done, the guide and student have to correct it. After this correction, again, it is presented to the departmental committee. That means within the department, the faculty will sit and listen to it and see whether the corrections have been done properly or not, and then it is finally accepted. So now this departmental approval, if you are going to have only one at the end of the whole thesis, it's not going to be enough, because you will need to have regular assessment. So I would suggest that at least every 6 months, departments should have this departmental assessments. And you can even call, the co-guides should be there so that they also know what is happening. And then it goes to the external examiner. Of course, we have no control over the external examiner. Some people take a lot of time. Some people do a very careful reading. So we have no control about that. But When it comes back for correction, it depends both on the integrity and intent of the guidance student to do a good correction, or whatever the comments have come, to properly go through them and to address those issues. And then, of course, when it comes to the internal departmental committee, in all fairness, they should sit and give a thorough critical review of whatever is submitted. And then, of course, finally it gets accepted. So the thesis goes through a lot of phases in this. And the intent is, or the intention is, to improve the quality of the thesis. So one of the questions many people ask is, do the examiners really read your thesis? And I can tell you, yes, they do. Some decades ago, many times examiners were not reading it, because what was happening was the examiners were from some of the state medical colleges where they had a lot of practice they were doing, so they didn't have time. So they used to, when they get the copy of the thesis, they will come as examiner, they'll simply bring it without reading it. And I remember one of our previous directors, this happened many decades ago. He said how his thesis, his guide put a 500 rupee note into the thesis, and he sent it, and it came back with the 500 rupee note in the thesis. But this is not happening now. I find many of the examiners, they do read the thesis and they give their comments and their recommendations, and generally it is quite high quality comments which they give, which means that they have actually read it carefully, because they also have to justify their recommendation. They can't say that accept, reject. They can't write like that. So they have to justify why they are saying. If they say they're rejecting it, they have to give a good recommendation. They have to justify why they are saying it has to be rejected. So generally the examiners read the thesis. Now, what are the common reasons that theses are rejected by examiners? These are some of the reasons which I know, but I can tell you there are many more reasons. The main thing which irritates all the examiners is if there is plagiarism. So you must understand that examiners are, when you send it to another peer, they know the kind of work that is going on in another department, in another institution. And therefore, if you copy paste from another thesis, it will be found out. Similarly, if there are obvious signs of cooking up, where people have, they're fudging data or they're making up data, if there are obvious signs, again, no one will put up with this. If there are too many errors in the thesis, because basically, why are we doing this thesis? You want to teach research methodology. You want to teach the resident how to write a scientific manuscript. And therefore, if there are too many errors in the sense that, in your methodology, you start with 150 subjects, and somewhere in your results, the number goes up to 215 or something like that. So that is also another reason why a thesis will be rejected. Another thing which irritates examiners, but sometimes it is not rejected, but they write very harsh comments, are when there are, you have this, what is called a ghost reference, or references do not match, or they find you have given wrong references. These are the things which will irritate any examiner. Similarly, if you are looking at the in figures, if you are, you have done 3 parameters, your illustrations are only talking about 2, you have forgotten about the 3rd parameter, and so on. I know one thesis which got rejected because of this, that the patient's names appeared in the master chart, because as you know, it has to be anonymized, and this the examiner felt was a huge ethical issue, so he rejected this. And of course, there are many more. These are some of the things which I know why theses have been rejected. So you might ask, what is the expectation? What is it they want finally? They expect, the examiners expect a work of reasonable quality. Okay, so the quality of the work should be reasonable. The report should be fairly well written. They expect ethics and integrity. That is why I said if there are obvious signs of cooking up or fudging data. They will not be happy with that. And they expect a fairly well-made dissertation book. The dissertation book should not look shabby. We are not expecting something which is, really out of the world, but it should look fairly good. And that is what, these are the things which they expect. They know that we are having limitations, especially now during COVID times. They know there are great limitations to the kind of quantum of work, the what you can be done in the limited time and so on. So examiners are aware of the limitations of DMMCH work in general. They do not expect to read a voluminous or earth-shattering research report. Okay, they expect. Okay, they expect some kind of work which is reasonable, and they also realize it is not PhD quality work. PhD means you have to have a huge volume of work, has to be larger. There has to be a good focus and all that. So they know that this is not PhD quality. So this is what is expected by the people. Okay, so this is what has been told, that good writing is difficult to define. It is easier to say what it is not than what it is. So in my talk, mostly I will be telling what to avoid and a little bit of what it is. Okay, so that there will be no, you will not be left in doubt of what is to be avoided. So general information. Please follow whatever has been given by the academic cell, but we expect about 50 to 75 pages of the thesis. This is excluding the references, annexures, and so on. So the written thing should be about 75 pages, 50 to 75 pages. Please use font Arial or Times New Roman, or it could be one of like Trebuchet or something like that, which you like. But do not use fonts, fancy fonts like Monotype Corsiva or Comic Sans. These are fonts which should be avoided. So these fonts should be chosen. Size of the font should be either 11 or 12. Don't make it so small it's difficult to read. Many examiners like me have white hair, and we find it difficult to read very small print. At the same time, don't have a font size of 14 or 16, because you want to, number of pages you want to increase. Again, that is not expected. So please make sure that in your thing, the font size is only 11 or 12. Then spacing. Spacing you should keep at about 1.5 lines. It is not necessary to have it double spaced, because then, it becomes very, very bulky. So 1.5 lines, 1.5 lines is fine. 1.3 is also okay. I mean, that's what I would, sort of look at. About 25 to 30 lines per page, 400 to 450 words per page. And you must, in the final printout which you're taking, please use good quality paper. Don't, sort of try to save money on that. Nowadays, we give, I think, 5,000 rupees for the thesis book. So I think you should be able to buy good quality paper, and you should print only on one side. This is not the time to think about the environment. Why I'm saying print only on one side? If your paper is not good, it tends to bleed to the other side. So you'll have a figure, and sometimes the ink has already bled to the other side, and it gives a very bad impression. So print only on one side. Your left margin should be larger, so that when it gets bound, you don't lose the words. And then there should be continuous pagination. Many times I find when I get manuscripts on my table, people forget to paginate. This is something you should always remember, because if anything is more than 2 pages, you should have a page number on that. And then again, this what I'm saying is because many times students, they tend to borrow from their seniors or somebody else. The certificate, the year will be different, the specialty will be different, and no one would have read it. Okay. So somebody from pharmacology will have a certificate from general medicine or surgery. So please, as a guide, check whether the year, the names of the guides, everything is correct. The title, the IEC approval of the protocol, the title is the same as the title of the study. See, why I'm telling it, it may look very silly for some of you, but let me tell you that all these things we have seen, okay, where the title of the IEC approval is very different from the actual title. So the title which has been approved by the academic committee, that is the title which should be finally in your thesis. Otherwise, you'll get into trouble. Similarly, check the names of the guide and co-guide, whether they are correct. My name is almost always spelled wrong. So I'm very, very particular about that. Also the contents page. Once you have a contents page, please go and check and see whether the pages on the contents page match with the pages which are in the different sections. So these are some of the things which may seem very silly, but you won't believe how many times these are the mistakes that are made. Okay, so now we'll come to the structure. What is the structure? The structure is what is called the IMRAD structure. What is this IMRAD structure? All of you are familiar with the IMRAD structure. And this structure is introduction, methods, results, and discussion. You know that any scientific paper will have this kind of a structure, but a thesis is different. So in a thesis, there are other elements which go into the thesis, like aims and objectives, that is a section. Similarly, review of literature, which comes after the introduction. So aims and objectives and review of literature. After the discussion, you have conclusions, you have a summary, you have the references, and you have the appendices. So all this go into a thesis. And these things, of course, in IMRAD also, I mean, in any paper which you are submitting to a journal, you will also have references. But basically, the other things, aims and objectives is a separate section, review of literature, conclusion, summary, appendices are separate in a thesis. So this is by and large the structure of a thesis. Now, what goes into appendices? You can have the list of figures, the list of tables, list of abbreviations used. If you have got an IEC approval, you might want to put that. If you have got, your clinical trials, if you have registered, you might want to put that certificate and so on. So if, like in AIIMS Bhubaneswar, we asked for a similarity certificate from Turnitin, that has to be attached. Then, of course, your master chart. Now, coming to the other pages. Now, apart from these things, you will also have a title page, then the certification, declaration, certificate, where the guide, co-guides, everybody signs, the declaration by the candidate. Sometimes candidates like to acknowledge different people. Then you might have a contents page. Now, this is a photograph of one of the theses which was submitted to AIIMS Bhubaneswar. And the book is extremely, it looks very good, right? It is, it looks very elegant. And as you can see on the side also, you find that the subject is written, the name of the president as well as the year. So that when it is stacked in the library, people can easily pull it out. So this kind of a format is it looks very good. And I think we can follow this in our institution. So now coming to the quality. What do the examiners look for in quality? Of course, they will try to see whether the hypothesis or the research question is good. Is it worth studying? Is it novel? Or are they simply reinventing the wheel? When I took this talk sometime back, someone asked me, what is wrong in trying to redo something in order to make sure that what they have found, we've got the same study? This is not a good idea for a thesis. If you simply want to repeat the work done by somebody else, just to say we want to see whether whether whatever findings they got is similar or not. So you need to see whether there is some novelty. This is what the examiners will be looking for, and whether the objectives can actually answer the research questions or the hypothesis. Also, whether the study is properly designed or not, whether the design is appropriate to the research question. Okay, if there are design flaws, supposing you are doing a experimental study without a control, you better have a good reason why you don't have a control, or what type of control is it? Is it an active control, a passive control? So majorly, if there are design issues, it becomes a problem. That is why I keep repeating, a study or a protocol should be discussed in the department many times, so that different people can give their comments and you will get a very good quality protocol which can go on to be studied. Because by the time it comes to the thesis, it is too late for you to change anything, right? Then about the quality, they look at the execution. Was the instrument proper? Did they choose a correct? If it is a questionnaire, is the questionnaire appropriate for our cultural milieu? Then when the results, they want to see did the results answer the questions that were actually raised, no? And how was it analyzed? Were appropriate statistical methods done? Was the interpretation correct? Were the conclusions valid? Because let me tell you, any examiner who is sitting with a thesis, he will look at a thesis for maybe an hour, maybe about 2 or 3 hours, maximum 2 to 3 hours. No one is going to sit and look at your thesis for about 10 hours. That is not going to happen. So, and people know how to go through it. So they will be giving a rapid reading. And so they will know that if your conclusions are too speculative, let me tell you, if you have done a study, you want to see the effect of some, fruit or vegetable on, let's say, on healthy subjects. You want to see the effect of some fruit or some vegetable on the blood pressure, and you find that whatever you have given decreases the blood pressure in these subjects. Finally, if you conclude that this is the best drug for hypertension, there is something wrong. You are being far too speculative, because you have done it on healthy volunteers and then you are concluding that this is a good drug for hypertension. So that kind of a speculation, which is not supported by data, you should be careful about. Then about the write-up. Now, often we tell that English is not our mother tongue, it is our second language, so we can't be expected to write. Yes, I agree, fully agree. But the thing is, there are so many tools which you can use. Our own institute, we sign up for Grammarly, you can use that. So if you have a poor, confusing writing style, please check with that, because it is not acceptable to have spelling and grammatical mistakes. Sometimes the meaning doesn't come out. So please make sure that you can always run it through somebody who is good in English. That you should be able to do. Then is it understandable? Of course, your structure, these are some of the things. And under each of these elements, I'll talk about this later also. Now, one of the things which I want to focus is the title. Why am I saying that? Because please be careful when you choose a title for a thesis. When you are writing the protocol, research protocol, getting the approvals, we don't pay enough focus on that. Finally, when it is being written up, you realize that the title is not that appropriate and it could have been better. So spend some time with choosing a good title when you are planning the study. That is my thing. Because the titles can be tailored and can be tailored to fit the type and scope of the article. And I'll just tell you how. The title of a thesis or a dissertation can be something like this, okay? Hemodynamics of obstructive sleep apnea in hypertensive patients. This is perfectly okay for a thesis or a dissertation. But if you're writing a paper from this thesis for a journal, the first one is a little too vague. So you might want to make it a little more specific, something like this. So when you're writing for a journal article, a manuscript, you might want to change it. If you are writing a review article on the same subject, you might write something like this: hemodynamics of obstructive sleep apnea, because a review article is again a very large thing, okay? Especially a narrative review. If you're writing a book, you might just name it obstructive sleep apnea. If you're writing for a newspaper, you might want to make it a little more attractive so that people will read. So sleep apnea risk reduced by exercise, something like that. So titles need to be tailored for the scope of the kind of written manuscript which you are writing. So make sure that it is properly planned, and you discuss with peers before you decide on the title. Now, because my talk today is about writing the thesis, so the question is, how do you write the title? So this is the same title. I have put it in 4 different formats. The top one, as you can see, is all caps, which is how commonly in most of the thesis, if you look at the title page or on the cover of the thesis, even what I have shown you, people always write the title in capitals. It's somehow as if you write it in capitals, people will wake up and see. The second is what is called title case. If you are typing in Word, it has something called title case, where the first letter of every word in the sentence is capitalized. The third example is what is called sentence case. That is, it will start with a capital letter and all the other words do not have capitals. And the last one is exactly how we are expected to write a title. Okay, so there are different ways. I would suggest that we should stop writing titles in capitals. It's not that, what shall I say, pleasing, acceptable. It is not the way you are expected to write it. Okay, so this last one is how you are expected to write, the fourth one. So I'll tell you how to write. So how do you what to capitalize in a title? Now this is the title which I will use to explain what I have to say. So always capitalize the first word as well as all the nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. So if you look at this, every noun, every pronoun, every adjective, hypertensive patients, it is capitalized. Can you see this in this? So the first word as well as all nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Now, what should not be capitalized are articles, conjunctions, prepositions. They should not be capitalized. As you can see, of is not capitalized. In is not capitalized. Okay. During is not capitalized. Then if you have a hyphenated word, locked in or mother-in-law. So in this, the first element in a hyphenated compound should be capitalized like this. Pan-sarcovirus neutralizing antibody. So this is a hyphenated word. So the first element is hyphenate in the hyphenated compound is capitalized, not the second one. But there are certain journals in which they expect you to hyphenate the second element also. If you go to New England Journal of Medicine, you will find they expect you to hyphenate the second one also. So it depends on the style of the journal. Okay. Now, if you have spelt out numbers, okay, 22, then both elements should be spelt out, should be capitalized. That is 25 means this T is also capital, 5 is also capital. So these are some of the rules which you need to have in your title. For example, if you have the word of an organism, then the family should be capitalized, the genus should not be, and it should be in italics. So these are some of the things which you have to follow in your title. So what else do they look for? In a review of literature, whether there is current information is there, because you're sending it to peers. So if you have not included some current information, they will know. Okay. And again, methodology, whether there is sufficient detail about the methodology, the procedures which you have used and all that. And these results, I will come to this when we are discussing results about duplicate or redundant illustrations and whether this is complete in all aspects. So again, discussion, they look for whether we have the structural conventions have been addressed. Have you discussed the limitations and strengths of your study? Is there too much of copy paste from methodology, from results and so on? So these are some of the things which they look for. Now, one of the things is avoid copy pasting introduction, review of literature and methodology from the protocol. The reason is a protocol is written for a different reason. Most of the time, residents will copy paste large portions of their review of literature or introduction simply from their protocol because they think once that is written, it is fine for this. Please, this should be avoided. Similarly, from the thesis, do not copy paste when you are going to send it to a journal, because the idea is that you should have the focus for which audience you are writing. So the audience is different, the way you are writing is going to be different, so it should be again rewritten. So this anyway, this conclusions, again, whether the conclusions will tally with the hypothesis. Generally what happens is when you have a thesis book, you look at the objectives, then you'll turn and see what the conclusions are. Okay, so people go like this: objectives, conclusions, and they go from page to page just to see whether you have stuck to the kind of conventions which is expected. Now, the other big problem is this references. I can't tell you how important it is to write references in the correct format and to stick to some kind of a uniform type of format. Okay, so this is very, very important. Again, in your summary, whether all the information is covered completely, and then also the relevance of the annexures. So references are easy to check, hence avoid mistakes. Many times this happens. There would be mistakes, but it is up to the guide to ensure that you have checked. Don't say that I used Zotero, I used this, this thing, and all the. You cannot put the blame on somebody else. You have to, even if you are using a reference manager, make sure that you also tend to check whether everything is okay. Right. What else do they look for? Now, we have spoken about the writing. What else is looked for? They also look for any violation of accepted ethical practices. Was the study ethically acceptable? You can't say that it was passed by our ethics committee if sometimes you have chosen a very vulnerable group which should not have been included. Then ethical procedures, were they followed? Any statement to that effect, whether we have followed all these ethical procedures and things like that? Informed consent and all that. So these are some ethics and integrity. Please see, if there is plagiarism, if there is evidence of fraud, people will definitely not want to accept your thesis. So be very careful about that. So in the book, if it is the quality of the paper is really poor, the printing is bad, you print it where the ink is not properly coming, in all the pages, or the binding is not good, pagination is not there. These things can irritate the examiner. So they may not expect a perfect book, but if it is poor quality, definitely it will invite some criticism. So how do you facilitate this as a guide? Some of you might ask, what can I do to do this a little better? My first thing is, please start the writing process early. People generally wait till the third year, and that too, when there is 3 months for you to submit the thesis, then only your guide will call and say, please start writing. No, it should be started much earlier. I would suggest even at the halfway point, you can very easily start writing, because we are using computers to write, and therefore easily things can be added, it can be deleted, it can be modified. But the process is a slow process, so it should start early. Insist that full papers of all the references must be downloaded and printed. Why I'm saying is, people will walk around with one pen drive and say, ma'am, I had it in this pen drive, I lost my pen drive. My hard disk fell and I've lost all the information. My PC crashed and I have lost all the things. So I always insist that people should download the full papers, and it should be printed out, and it should be in a file. This you must all insist, because there is a fashion now that people don't even bother to read the papers. They are writing after reading the abstract. And we know that many times the abstracts are not updated with the paper, and therefore the information in an abstract might be very different from what is there in the actual paper. You must meet with a postgraduate at least once a month to review progress. No harm. If there are no new papers, both of you should read together. Okay, ask your postgraduate, what did you learn from this paper? This is a good way of trying to find out where he is in his thesis, whether you can help him, any skills are required, any problems are met. So at least once a month, you have to review progress of the thesis. And this review of literature should continue right from the beginning, because you will find suddenly that there is a lot of input to the work which you might be doing. Plan the data analysis early. You might do the data analysis later, but you must plan what tests you are going to do, how you are going to do it. Make sure that the data entry is done simultaneously, so that at the end of it, there is not too much for the postgraduate to do. Because what will happen, they start collecting these forms, and that has to be put into a database, Excel spreadsheet or something like that. So that has to go on simultaneously. Otherwise, if everything is kept for the end, there will be a lot of mistakes. So plan that early. And if you are having monthly meetings, please document it. I would suggest it is written down in the logbook of the thesis of the postgraduate that you have met with, and these are some of the comments you have given, because it goes both ways. Sometimes I have people coming to my office and saying, my student has not done anything. He is how many times I have told also, he doesn't listen, and I'm not able to get him to submit, and so on. Postgraduates will come and tell me, my guide doesn't even give me time. I send all WhatsApp messages. They don't meet with me and all that. So it is important that these meetings and decisions taken are documented. And I would suggest at least once in 4 months or once in 6 months, you have a meeting with all the co-guides. It should not be that co-guides are just there only for namesake, that the last moment they will just sign, and being a co-guide means they have to take responsibility also. So these are some of the things which I feel which will facilitate thesis writing. And of course, this is something which as residents we also have gone through, where you give the paper, the guide gives the corrections, he edits it, gives him the latest draft, and again he goes on correcting the thing. So this is an endless cycle, but that is all done with the intention to improve the whole thesis thing. So with that, I finish my talk, and now if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take. Any questions? You can please ask. You can unmute yourself and ask.
Madam, this is Samarendra, madam. For PhD thesis, madam, what should be the total number of pages?
For PhD?
Yes, madam.
It depends from university to university, but in a PhD, we expect it should be at least about 150. I would expect at least 150.
Thank you.
Madam Bhagwat.
Yes, Bhagwat. Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am. Very nice to listen from you. One thing I just missed that during the external examiner, we'll send our thesis to the external examiner. That is before the final exam of that PG. Just
yes.
Kindly clarify the timing at that time only.
Yes, because see, the resident is expected to submit his thesis 6 months before the final exam, right? So that is a timeline. 6 months before the final exam, he is expected to submit the thesis. So then the examination wing will send it to an external examiner and give him, I think, some 3 weeks or 4 weeks time to respond, and then they respond, and then that will be given. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
So someone has asked a question whether they can, whether a thesis can be published in a journal. Definitely, a thesis. In fact, that is what you are expected to do. A thesis, just a thesis is not enough. You must publish it in a journal, and that is expected. So to the person who asked the question, yes, of course, it is expected that a thesis will be published in a journal.
Good evening, Madam. Saubhagya here.
Yes, Saubhagya, please. Yes.
Madam, it was a wonderful presentation. My doubt is you presented regarding the how to write the thesis, Madam. As a evaluator, examiner of thesis, when you are getting from outside, your tips how to evaluate it properly, Madam, correctly.
Okay. See, my focus for these 3 weeks is how to write. Okay.
Madam.
Because it is not on how to review a thesis. Okay. But let me tell you, if you know how to write the thesis, you will be able to evaluate it. Because if you know what you should be, what mistakes you should not be making, when you are evaluating the thesis, it's the same thing, isn't it?
Yes,
so
madam.
If you want how to review a paper, we can do it differently, but that is not my focus. My focus for these 3 weeks is on writing. So now I have given the general outline about what an examiner looks for. My next talk is going to be how to write the introduction. The next week I will be talking about how to write the review of literature and the results. And the third week I will talk about how to write the discussion and the references. So this is where I am going to. Somebody is asking whether there is any software for reference management. Yes, there are many softwares which you can use. If you want a free software, that will be Zotero. I'll talk about this software for references in my third talk. So we'll focus here now. If you have anything to talk about the general thing, please ask. Otherwise, I'll go to my next topic.
Ma'am, Anupam here. Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, Anupam. Yeah, please.
Ma'am, how many references should be given in a thesis, in a PG thesis?
So it depends. No, there is no particular number which you can say, but I would say in a MD thesis, you should stick to anything between about 60 to 75. Because if you have a PG thesis, I have seen a PhD thesis with 400 references. Okay. And I asked that student, that PhD scholar, how many of these 400 references have you read? And he said about 100. That means quarter of the references only he has read. That is not the idea. The idea is that when you write a thesis, at least you are expected to read more than what you have listed as references. But at least whatever you have listed, you are expected to have read all the references. So I would say a number which is biteable would be around 50 to 75. Let's not make it more than that, because I don't think anyone is going to read that much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, so somebody is asking, can we alter the heading of the thesis, or does it have to be exactly the same as in the synopsis? Now, the idea of giving a protocol, passing it through your committees and passing it through the ethics committee is that this is what you are doing. So I would not agree to somebody altering the title of the thesis after it has been approved by the committees, various committees. So whatever you have got approved by the internal ethics committee, that title has to be kept. If you are planning to change it for whatever reason, it has to again go back to the ethics committee and it has to be clean. It has to be approved. So someone wants to know whether methodology can be changed. Can methodology change from protocol to final, like additional points to? I would not say that this is a good idea. For the simple reason is that the idea of writing a protocol is you give it a lot of thought. Then you make a protocol, you discuss it with your peers, with the other colleagues, and then you finalize a protocol. If you keep on changing the goalpost, you will never reach your initial question might change. That is not how research is done. Research is a planned work. So you have to plan your work correctly. You raise a question, you identify a methodology so that your research question can be answered, and you have to stick to it. You cannot keep on changing something, as the time comes. Sometimes you may need to change your, your sample size. Like what happened with this COVID time. People had identified a particular sample size, but we found that because of COVID, patients were not coming in, hospitals were closed, we were in a lockdown. So we could not reach the sample size, and we asked all the students, all the residents to write it as such, that due to COVID, the sample size could not be finally done. So, and also your conclusions will be based on whatever sample size you have been able to get at that point of time. So please don't keep on changing. That is not a good thing. So there is one question which somebody has asked, whether there is any company or journals who help in thesis writing and paper writing, because it's very difficult to write it correctly on your own. This is something which I feel very strongly about. If you are in academics, if you are in a medical institution, you have to teach yourself to write. Okay, because all of us have gone through school. In school, we are taught how to write essays. And yes, it was difficult, but then all of us have got through it because we kept writing. Our teachers made us keep writing essays. And so this is not something which is very difficult. Believe me, we think it is very difficult, but it is not. You just have to train yourself. I studied all my life in school in Tamil. And, so I am also writing in my second language. So many of us do write in second language. So please do not go to this, these paper mills, because they are doing a big injustice. And if you go to them and get your thesis written by them, remember, when you become a guide, you will not be in a position to guide anyone. So I will not agree to anybody going to these people who help in writing the thesis. That should be avoided at all costs. I will not agree to that at all. Can we include new secondary findings not included in the protocol during the study? Yeah, so let me talk about that when we come to results. This thing is, yes, if you have some unexpected findings, you can include it in your results. That is different from doing a different methodology. So if you find something unusual, you can include it. So, right. So I think I'll go to this, my next talk. Is that okay, Rituparna?
Madam, I have a question, Dr. Swayam here.
Yes, Swayam, please go ahead.
Madam, our students, they receive ICMR grant and also Mamta Fellowship, all these grants. So how they should be using their money? Is there any guideline, or that is what I want to know?
So they can use it for their printing, for their purposes. For example, like I told you that, ask them to download all the papers and print it out and keep. So they may need for Xeroxing purposes. Supposing they need to go out somewhere to collect data, they can use it for, their petrol charges. Or it might be that they want to buy some probe or some particular, some kit which they want to buy, some chemical they want to buy. So there are different ways in which they can use. They should use it for that also. So supposing, say, you are in community medicine, if they are going to, talk to some villagers, they can use this money to buy some snacks for those villages. So that's up to them and up to the guide how you can use that material, that money. Okay.
Thank you.